Hello, welcome to tonight's story. Today we will be uncovering life in the 1930s Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, with topics such as the infamous Black Sunday dust storm of April 14th, 1935, the stock market crash of 1929, Okie exodus, the migration of more than 2.5 million people from the Plains states, and last but not least, the election of 1932 and Roosevelt's fireside chats. But before we begin, I would really love to know where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you now. It is so fascinating to me to know who is joining me from around the world. Now let's get started. Picture this. You're standing on your porch staring across miles of flat, cracked earth. The land was once golden with wheat, tall and proud. Now it's a sea of brown scars, parched, brittle, silent. The year is 1934. You're a farmer, just like your father was. Your hands are calloused, your skin burned from years beneath a once generous sun. But lately, the sun's been cruel. The rain has forgotten you. And the wind? The wind has become something you fear. It starts small, just a breeze carrying dust. But then it grows. The sky darkens like a coming eclipse. The birds disappear. Even the dogs hide. And then it hits. A black blizzard. You slam the door shut. Stuff rags in the cracks. You call out for your children. Wet a cloth, cover your faces. The storm screams against the house like a beast trying to claw its way in. You wait, you pray, and you wonder, how long can anyone live like this? The Dust Bowl wasn't just a natural disaster, it was man-made, born of good intentions and bad judgment. For decades, settlers had flooded into the southern plains, Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, Colorado, lured by promises of fertile soil and endless opportunity. The land was ploughed, turned over by steel blades and gasoline-powered tractors. Native grasses, which had held the soil in place for centuries, were ripped up and replaced by rows of wheat. During the wet years of the 1920s, it seemed like a dream come true. Yields were high, wheat prices soared. Some called it the Great Plough-Up, but underneath the harvests the land was growing tired. It was never meant for such deep tilling. The soil was loose, vulnerable. Then, in 1931, the rains stopped. The wind returned first, then the dust. Dust coated everything. It seeped through walls, under doors, into water buckets, into your lungs. Families nailed wet sheets to the windows. Mothers would sweep 5, 6, 7 times a day, only for the dust to settle again within minutes. Children coughed in their sleep. Men woke up with grit in their eyes and noses. Some wore gauze masks outside. Others simply didn't go out. Cars had to drive with their headlights on in the middle of the day. You could hold your hand 6 inches from your face and not see your fingers. Livestock died standing. Dust filled their nostrils, choked them. Chickens lay dead in the yard. Cows wasted away, either starving because there was no grass or poisoned by eating dust-covered feed. And people got something they called dust pneumonia. A slow, smothering illness that filled the lungs with fine particles, hospitals filled with children, the elderly, even strong farmers coughing up black sludge. And then came Black Sunday. It was a warm, sunny afternoon. Families were outside, children were playing, churchgoers were walking home. But then, just before dusk, the horizon turned black. A wall of dirt, hundreds of feet tall, roared across the plains like a freight train. It swallowed everything. Chickens, tractors, barns, gone in seconds. People ran blindly. One man said it was like being hit with a shovel full of flour. Another said it felt like the end of the world. The storm stretched over 200 miles wide. The dust was so thick it reached Washington, D.C., even coated the decks of ships in the Atlantic Ocean. The nation finally took notice. A young girl in Kansas remembered waking up choking and finding the family cow dead, its mouth filled with dirt. Her mother wept while trying to dig out the vegetable patch, even though nothing had grown in months. A farmer in Oklahoma recalled how they slept with wet towels over their faces. "We'd pray it would rain and not blow," he said, but most nights it did neither. One woman wrote in her diary, "The baby coughed all night again. I don't think his lungs can take much more. The dust stole more than air. It stole futures, dreams, pride. It wasn't just a physical battle. It was an emotional war. These were proud people. They didn't ask for help. But the land was broken, and with it, the promise of prosperity. Men stood in empty fields, watching the wind undo years of back-breaking labour. Some abandoned their farms. Others drank. A few couldn't take it and disappeared into the plains, never to return. Families who had once owned land now lived in cars. Children born in hope were raised in hardship. Many became Okies, a name that started as a slur for Dust Bowl migrants. They loaded what they could onto old trucks and headed west to California, hoping to pick fruit or find factory work. But the journey wasn't salvation. It was just another chapter in the struggle. But even in the darkest storms, there was grit, and not just the kind in your teeth. Communities found ways to endure. Neighbours shared food, fuel, advice. Women sewed flour sacks into clothes for their children. Children took over farm chores when their fathers grew too sick to work. Government programs finally stepped in. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal offered jobs and hope. The Soil Conservation Service taught new farming techniques, terracing, crop rotation, planting native grasses. Slowly change took root. By the late 1930s, the rains began to return. Not enough to erase the pain, but enough to grow again. The Dust Bowl left scars on the land, but deeper ones on the people. It was a time of desperation and determination, of broken dreams and unbreakable will. Today, if you visit those towns in the southern plains, you might find old barns weathered to grey, or fence posts buried halfway in sand. But you'll also find stories of survival, of families who stayed, of children who grew up with dust in their lungs, but fire in their hearts. The skies are clearer now. The wind still blows, but not with the fury of before. And if you listen close, you might still hear the whispers of those who once stood against the storm and refused to be blown away. Imagine it's a bitter winter morning in Chicago, 1932. The wind howls off Lake Michigan, biting through threadbare coats and worn-out shoes. The once bustling industrial city now feels hollow. Factories sit silent, smokestacks cold, streets slick with slush and sorrow. You are Thomas Delaney. Once you were a line foreman at a meat-packing plant on the south side. You made a decent wage, came home to your wife Nora and your 2 children, with enough money for a rented apartment and a Sunday roast. Now you've been out of work for 17 months. The factory shuttered after its investors pulled out. They said the market had tightened. But you know what really happened. The crash. The damn crash. Let's rewind. The stock market crash of October 1929 didn't happen in a single moment, but Black Tuesday, October 29th, was the breaking point. Millions of shares traded hands in a single day as panic spread. Prices plummeted. People who had borrowed money to buy stocks on margin, investing just 10% of the cost and borrowing the rest, were wiped out overnight. Thomas hadn't owned any stocks, but the crash hit him all the same. Companies folded, businesses cut back, factories closed. The panic on Wall Street spilled into every corner of America. Banks failed by the hundreds, and when a bank failed, your savings vanished. There was no deposit insurance yet. FDIC wouldn't exist until 1933. People ran to their banks in hysterical flocks, desperate to withdraw their money. But it was already gone, loaned out, evaporated in the market collapse, or hoarded by the bank itself, which then locked its doors for good. That's how Thomas lost the $112 he'd saved for his daughter's education. Back in the present, 1932, Thomas rises early. There's little heat in the tenement apartment, and the landlord has already hinted they'll be evicted by February. His son, Billy, is sick with a cough, and his daughter Mary has stopped attending school to look after him. Nora ladles out the last of the watered-down oatmeal. Thomas wraps a scarf around his neck and heads out, not to a job, but to stand in line. The line is long. It snakes around the block. Men of all ages, some in suits from better days, some in patched workwear, wait silently. It's the bread line, funded by a local church. Once it was embarrassing to take charity. Now it's the only way to eat. The soup is hot, if thin. The bread is stale but filling, and the men are quiet, too proud to speak, too tired to complain. Further downtown, Hoovervilles have sprung up. Shanty towns made of scraps, tar paper, and whatever could be scavenged. They're named bitterly after President Herbert Hoover, whom many blamed for the Depression's severity. Some cities tried to clear them out, but the tents always returned. Families like Thomas's moved in when there was nowhere else to go. Fires burned in oil drums, kids played in alleys, and mothers prayed that the soup stretched one more day. Thomas remembers the first time he had to tell his children there'd be no Christmas, not even a toy, not even a tree. He watched Nora sew patches into her only dress and cried when she wasn't looking. Across America, suicide rates soared, particularly among businessmen and formerly well-off professionals who saw no way out. Men felt emasculated, their identity, their worth was tied to providing, and now they couldn't. Women took in laundry, children shined shoes. Many dropped out of school entirely. In 1933, nearly 25% of the American workforce was unemployed. But even those with jobs saw their wages slashed, hours cut, and benefits disappear. And yet, somehow, people endured. In Thomas's neighborhood, something beautiful started to happen. When money ran out, bartering began. A neighbor who could sew traded mended coats for potatoes. Another who had chickens offered eggs in exchange for wood cutting. The church opened a donation closet. Volunteers offered free soup and bread, sometimes slipping an extra roll to the children. In cities across the nation, mutual aid societies sprang up, run by unions, churches, or just determined neighbors. In Seattle, a workers' cooperative used labor instead of cash. You helped someone build a fence, they gave you milk. You fixed a roof, and in return, you got shoes. These weren't just acts of charity, they were lifelines of human dignity. They allowed people to contribute, to feel useful again. Thomas began volunteering at the bread line that once fed him. He became the man ladling out the soup, not just taking it. It restored something in him, a sense of purpose. In 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt would take office with a promise, a New Deal for the American people. But at this point in our story, that's still just a rumour. For now, people like Thomas survive one day at a time. They tell jokes in line to lift spirits. They share news of a cousin who found work with the city, or a distant relative who moved west to try their luck in California. They gather for Sunday potlucks, whatever they can spare, and sing old songs around borrowed radios. They've lost a lot, but not everything, not their grit, not their humanity, not their hope. The Great Depression wasn't just a financial collapse. It was a test of the American soul. Behind every statistic was a story like Thomas's, of resilience, reinvention, and the quiet daily courage to keep going when everything fell apart. The bread lines were long, the bank vaults were empty, but in kitchens, back alleys, and church basements, community kept people alive, and sometimes that was enough. A man named Eli Carter stands in the doorway of what was once his pride, his farm, but the topsoil's gone, the wheat's dead, and the house, battered by dust storms and debt, creaks like it's giving up too. It's 1936, the 5th year without decent rain, and Eli, his wife Mabel, and their 3 kids, Clara, Jonah, and baby Ruthie, are about to do what more than 2.5 million Americans are doing: load everything they own onto a wheezing Ford Model A and point it west, toward California, toward what they hope is a better life. This isn't just a road trip, it's an exodus, the largest migration in American history during the Great Depression. The Carters aren't sharecroppers, not quite. They own their land, 40 acres of Oklahoma clay that Eli's father broke with his own plough. But that pride has crumbled. The bank took the deed last spring, and now it's just dust, fine as flour, swirling into lungs and cupboards and children's eyes. Mabel stitches flour sacks into dresses for Clara and packs jars of canned peaches wrapped in rags to keep them from breaking. Eli sells the last of their tools to pay for gas, 13 cents a gallon. The car is rigged with everything they have left: bedding, pots, a Bible, and Ruthie's wooden doll. As they roll away down the dusty road, their neighbour, old Mr. Blackwood, waves from his porch. He's staying behind, too old to travel. "Right, if you get there," he calls. Eli nods, but he won't. There's no address, just hope. They take Route 66, the mother road. So do hundreds of thousands of other Dust Bowl families from Texas, Arkansas, Kansas, most of them called Okies, whether or not they're from Oklahoma. The Carters pass endless convoys of jalopies, mattresses tied with rope, baby goats in crates, pots clanging from bumpers. People sleep in ditches, under bridges, on the side of the road. The old and sick die along the way. Others are born, babies delivered beneath trees or in the back seats of cars. Gas is expensive. Food is scarcer. The kids get used to hunger and lukewarm bean stew. They bathe in streams and wash clothes in creeks. Jonah asks if California has peaches. He's only seen them in cans. In Gallup, New Mexico, a gas station attendant warns Eli, "California don't want you folks. They say there's signs, no Okies, no dogs." Eli thanks him and drives on. When they cross into California, the sun is warmer. The air smells sweet. They see orange trees, real ones, but the dream is quickly bruised. They're stopped by police near the California-Arizona border. The patrolman asks if they have money. Eli lies and says yes. The officer tells him if they can't support themselves, they'll be turned back. It's called the Bum Blockade, an effort by California to keep the poor out. Eventually they make it through, but there's no welcome wagon, no promised land, just fields, strawberries, lettuce, grapes, and growers who pay 10 cents an hour, maybe less. The Carters move into a squatters' camp near Bakersfield. It's a sea of tents, tar paper shacks, and rusted cars. No electricity, no plumbing, open trenches for toilets. Children run barefoot through mud and flies. Disease spreads quickly, typhoid, malaria, despair. Mabel tries to keep dignity alive. She boils water for tea, teaches Clara to write in the dirt with a stick, sews patches on everyone's clothes. Dorothea Lang, the photographer, comes one day. She snaps a photo of Mabel cradling baby Ruthie, eyes full of worry. That image, migrant mother, becomes an icon of the era, even if no one in the camp ever sees it. Eli finds work picking cotton, but it doesn't last. There are more workers than jobs. Growers keep wages low. If you complain, you're fired. If you strike, you're blacklisted. At one point, the Carters join a protest organised by fellow migrants trying to unionize. Eli doesn't say much, but he shows up. A local sheriff cracks skulls with a nightstick. Mabel drags Eli back home with blood running down his cheek. Back home, Eli was Mr. Carter, a landowner, a church deacon. Here, he's an Okie, a slur spat by locals who call them lazy, dirty, even criminal. The children feel it too. Clara is bullied at a makeshift school called Dumb Okie for her accent and tattered clothes. She stops speaking up in class. Jonah starts fighting. Mabel cries at night. Quietly, she misses her mother's garden, her neighbours, her kitchen, the smell of honeysuckle in spring. Even the dust, in a way, feels like home. But life doesn't stop. It never does. One day, Eli lands a steady job with the WPA, part of Roosevelt's New Deal. He helps build roads. It's hard work, but it pays. The family moves into a proper camp run by the federal government. Better sanitation, real walls, a schoolhouse. Clara learns to read again. Jonah plays baseball with other camp kids. Ruthie, now 3, doesn't remember Oklahoma, only California. She calls the tent home. In 1939, John Steinbeck publishes The Grapes of Wrath. It's fiction, but it feels like their story. In it, the Jodes suffer, fight, and endure, just like them. Mabel hears on the radio that President Roosevelt praised the book. Maybe their voices are being heard. Eli never gets back his farm, but he plants a peach tree in the back of their new home, rented, not owned, but clean and dry. The first fruit won't come for years, but that's all right. It's not the dream they left Oklahoma chasing, but it's something. The Okie exodus wasn't just a journey across state lines. It was the migration of dreams, of identity, of entire lives uprooted and carried westward on tires that barely held air. Some gave up. Some went back. Some vanished into the rows of lettuce fields, names lost to history. But others, like the Carters, found a way to endure, not because California was a paradise, but because they made it through. And that, in the end, was more than enough. The wind howled outside broken tenement windows. Soup lines stretched for blocks in the heart of American cities. Farms lay fallow, banks had vanished, and hope felt like a luxury few could afford. By the winter of 1932, the United States was not just in a depression, it was in despair. But change was coming. In November of that year, a man who couldn't walk unaided would step forward to lead a nation desperate to stand on its feet. His name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, And with him came not just a new president, but a new deal. It began with a voice, steady, calm, confident. On March 4th, 1933, FDR took the oath of office. The country was on the verge of total collapse. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans were unemployed. Thousands of banks had failed. Farms were abandoned. Industrial output had fallen by half. But Roosevelt didn't flinch. In his inaugural address, he gave the people what they needed most. Not policy, not plans, but courage. The only thing we have to fear, he said, is fear itself. And then, within days, came his most brilliant innovation, not a law or a program, but a connection. The fireside chats, simple radio broadcasts spoken in plain English, where Roosevelt explained, without condescension, what was happening and why. Millions would sit around their radios and listen to their president as if he were in their living room. He soothed their panic, calmed the markets, and built trust. From there came a flood, a storm of action. FDR's New Deal wasn't one single plan, but a sweeping, evolving series of programs designed to address 3 urgent needs. 1. Relief for the suffering. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, hired millions to build roads, schools, bridges, airports, even hiking trails. This wasn't charity, it was a lifeline with dignity. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, took young unemployed men and gave them uniforms, food and purpose. They reforested parks, fought soil erosion and built much of the infrastructure we still use today. Imagine a young man from Kentucky who had never seen a paycheck in his life suddenly planting trees in Yosemite, sending money home to his mother and writing about it in a new government-sponsored journal. The CCC didn't just give him work, it gave him pride. Second, recovery for the economy. The National Recovery Administration, NRA, set codes for fair wages and working hours, attempting to stabilise prices and protect workers and small businesses. Its Blue Eagle logo became a symbol of patriotic participation. We do our part. Meanwhile, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, AAA, paid farmers to reduce crop production, to raise prices and end the cycle of overproduction and ruinous surplus. It was controversial, destroying crops while people were hungry, but it aimed to fix the market itself, not just symptoms. In the Dust Bowl states, where the wind had turned fields to deserts, the AAA paired with soil conservation programs to teach better farming practices. The government provided subsidies for planting grass instead of wheat, for rotating crops, for building windbreaks. It was an unprecedented partnership between science and survival. Third reform to prevent future catastrophe. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, was created to guarantee that people's bank deposits were safe, ending the bank runs that had caused so much chaos. Then came Social Security, a revolutionary promise that the elderly would not be left to starve. For the first time, the government offered a safety net, funded by payroll taxes, that reached across generations. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, was born to regulate the stock market, preventing the wild speculation and fraud that had crashed Wall Street in 1929. But not everyone cheered. Some thought Roosevelt had gone too far, calling him a traitor to his class. Business owners balked at regulation. Conservatives warned of creeping socialism. Others thought he hadn't gone far enough. Louisiana's populist Senator Huey Long launched the Share Our Wealth campaign, promising to cap fortunes and redistribute wealth more aggressively. And yet, FDR kept walking the tightrope between innovation and tradition, capitalism and compassion. The Supreme Court struck down some of his early programs, but he adapted. Some feared he might seize too much power, especially when he tried to pack the court with his own appointees. But Roosevelt's genius lay in flexibility, adjusting policies while keeping the people on his side. Beyond economics, the New Deal planted cultural seeds that still bloom. The Federal Art Project, part of the WPA, funded thousands of artists, playwrights, and musicians. Murals, plays, symphonies, and oral histories were created from coast to coast. American identity, rural, urban, black, white, immigrant, native, was captured in paint, print, and performance. Folk singers like Woody Guthrie wandered the land, guitar slung over shoulder, singing ballads about breadlines, barbed wire, and belief. Public libraries were expanded, national parks were restored, schools got lunch programs. Electricity came to rural areas through the Tennessee Valley Authority and the Rural Electrification Act, transforming isolated farms into modern homes. By the late 1930s, the clouds of war were gathering, and yes, it would take the industrial might of World War II to fully end the Great Depression. But the foundation for that resurgence, the bridges, the railways, the electrified farms, the healthier banks, the restructured economy, was laid in the New Deal years. Roosevelt didn't solve every problem. He didn't end inequality or erase suffering, but he changed the relationship between the people and their government. He proved that democracy could adapt in a crisis, that compassion could be national policy, that a voice on the radio, speaking plainly and with conviction, could steady a crumbling republic. The New Deal didn't just repair a nation, it reimagined it, from despair to renewal, from dust to dignity. The seeds of recovery were sown in hard soil, but they took root and they grew, and in many ways we are still living in their shade. And that will be all for today's story. I thank you very much for joining me, and I hope to see you again soon.